Hi, I'm Brandon Brockway-Ring with Key Inspection Services. We are a home inspection company that's been around since 2003, and I have a fantastic panelist here for our amazing show of Deal Breaker or Not. If you guys would please introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Angelina Wallet, and my title is Managing Broker. I work at John L. Scott in Redmond with my husband, Nick, and I have been with John L. Scott since 2003 as a residential real estate broker.
Wonderful.
And I'm Nick Wilson. I've been with John L. Scott for a couple of years, but I've been with Angelina Wallet for over 20 of those years. So I've got plenty of experience in this industry.
Yes.
And then some.
And then some.
I'm Dan Wingard here. I'm the office leader and business coach for Redmond John L. Scott, and I've been in real estate since 1998.
That's for a little bit.
A little bit.
I am Uzma Munir Hamid, and I've been selling real estate since 2018. I was an attorney in my previous life, and I focus mostly on the East Side.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we're gonna have a lot of experts here. The idea behind the show is, within your experience of doing a lot of deals, a lot of different personalities and everything. On the real estate side, I want to kind of get an insight to what you feel like is a deal breaker or not. So I got a list of questions here for you. I'll just kind of go down the road, see, kind of tag in and see who wants to answer it here. So one I've got here is, here's a scenario. The roof is nearing the end of its life expectancy, but doesn't have any leaks on it. The buyer insists on a full replacement or a large credit. For you, is that deal breaker or not?
Am I the listing agent or the buyer's agent?
Let's say you're the buyer's agent.
Okay. I thought you
Well,
would answer.
you've got
We actually just went through this.
Perfect.
And we were representing the buyer, and we did ask for a new roof because we felt like we were in a position to do so. And we got, let's see, what did we get? 75% of the cost of a new roof, which we thought was a win because we thought we were going to get nothing. There was no active leak, but there also wasn't a whole lot of life left in that roof. And if the appraiser came by and said, oh, does this have 5 years left on it? Doubtful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for you, not a deal breaker.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I guess part of it also depends on the kind of market you're in.
Yeah.
Whether you're able to negotiate or not and how badly the buyer wants the house. But to your point about appraising and with the insurance issues being such a big deal, you might be able to pull that off because if they don't sell to us, then any other buyer who's coming, the house might not appraise because most of the buyers in the market need a mortgage. And B, the house might not appraise, like Angelina mentioned.
And C, the insurance issue
Yes.
might be an
Of
issue
course,
where it
of
wouldn't be
course.
able to be insured.
Yeah.
For
So
sure.
I'm curious on that. Did the lender lend on it without it being done?
They lent on it. Yeah. So we were pretty fortunate.
And actually about the insurance issue, even before insurance became an issue, such a hot issue, this was, I think, around COVID timeframe. And this house I sold where the roof was nearing its life, and the insurance company actually refused to insure it. So they were able to get eventually, had to get it fixed themselves. But for sure, that's definitely a concern now more than ever.
Yeah,
Interesting. So it could be a deal breaker for some people.
could be.
Could be.
Yeah, but not with us.
Not with
Not
you.
negotiate.
I mean, it's expensive, right? It's one of the most expensive things on a house. It matters a
It
lot.
is expensive.
and the fact that we have a roofer that works closely with us made it easy for the transaction to happen because we had the whole project lined up.
Yeah, and his price was very, very competitive, which was good for the buyer.
Nice. Wonderful. So here's the next scenario we have here. So the buyer learns from disclosures the pipe burst 2 years ago, but is professionally remediated and repaired. Still they're uneasy and request a deep discount. Is that a deal breaker or not? No? Why
Why are they asking for it? Just because they can? Sorry.
No, I think the reason they're probably asking something like this comes up when they see a water stain. But like you mentioned, it's professionally fixed. And if you have invoices to prove that, there's no reason for asking because when an issue arises, the best you can do is get it professionally fixed. It's fixed. There's that.
And that's peace of mind. Nothing's being hidden and it's done by a reputable person. It's handled.
Absolutely.
So I
Then
don't
do
think...
a DIY, yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't ask for anything.
I would agree with that. And it's never us that are saying whether it's a deal breaker or not. We're giving advice to our client, and they could make it a deal breaker by just saying I'm walking away, losing their earnest money. They have that right, but they would potentially lose that.
That's an excellent point, because at the end of the day, it's about setting expectations, and you know what makes people happy when expectations are met or exceeded.
Exceeded, yeah.
So it's about setting those expectations and then just providing that information. And at the end of the day, of course, we are there to support you. It's your decision. If that's what makes you happy, then that's what
And
it is.
if it's a valid concern from the buyer perspective, then it's something they're going to be thinking about for years. They're never going to have a peace of mind that everything's okay. If it's a marketing tactic or just trying to get a deal, then they'll get over it. But
Yeah.
Always validating their concerns and then doing the best we can to appease that.
Wonderful. Yeah, because repairs are going to happen on a home. It's inevitable. So I always feel like it's not a deal breaker in my eyes. So interesting. Thank you. Thanks for the insight there. So here's a scenario on the next one. The inspection lists dozens of minor issues. You know, outlet covers, slow drains, worn weather stripping. The buyer treats it like a punch list for new construction and wants it all addressed, but it's not really a brand new home. For somebody, is that a deal breaker for somebody that's seen these little things?
Well, like Uzma was saying, you set expectations, and that's kind of what sets the tone, right? If someone approaches me as a listing agent with a list of a million concerns that are trivial, I think, oh gosh, they must be new, or their buyer must be very nervous. This doesn't make any sense. Maybe give them a small credit or something to make them feel better. But, you know, what we're really looking for are safety issues, things that cost a lot of money to fix. Those are the main things. Of course, if you want to try to use the inspection as an opportunity to beat up the seller, you're welcome to do that, but may or may not be successful.
Right.
And like with any inspection, I'm sure you do that with your inspections. All good inspectors do. And as real estate professionals, we do it too when we are representing a buyer. Before an inspection, you prepare them that no house is perfect. Even new construction is not perfect. But for new construction, for example, the main difference between new construction and resale is with new construction, something minor would be defective. It needs to be fixed. But for resale, that might be a marginal issue because every home is going to have issues, and we're not going to make a punch list. Like you mentioned, it's not going to be it's resale. It's a previously owned home. So we're not going to present a laundry list, like she mentioned. On the other side, we want our requests to be taken seriously. So 1 or 2 main items, either big ticket items or health and safety, like she mentioned. That's what we want addressed.
And I would rather get money. I don't know how you feel about this. I'd rather get a credit for my buyer in most instances than have the work performed by some random person. And of course, you can specify, I want this done by so-and-so, or I want 3 bids, or make it real complicated. But in my experience, I feel like getting a credit, then getting it handled, knowing how much of a credit you should be asking for, that's usually the best way to go. Because that way the buyer's in control.
I kind of agree with that, but I would share that sometimes it has to be done before because, for example, it's an appraisal issue and it needs to be
Like the
fixed.
roof, for example.
And sometimes the buyers are, people, for example, younger generation who want to just move right in and don't want to worry about the work. So in that case, I'm happy to offer the service of getting them quotes and figuring out, and then, let's go with this one. But I agree that's great value. But a little bit of it depends on the situation too, is what I would add.
Well, I think with the list, that could be, here's what's wrong, and sharing the inspection report, and this is what it's going to cost, but not putting that in and then asking for a credit can be appropriate.
Yeah.
And from a seller point of view, having a pre-inspection to where you have this laundry list of things
you take care of.
that you can knock off over half of them just by knowing what they are, instead of waiting for somebody else to find a problem and beat you up on a price. You can save yourself a lot of money just by having a pre-inspection done.
Making a shorter list, for example, one thing
Yes.
that comes up, which is if a light bulb is not working, you guys have to call it out. And that just makes the list longer. So, those are things that, sometimes the seller can do themselves, or even I can do for you. It's just a carbon monoxide detector. I can replace it, or the batteries. So the list is shorter. So for sure.
And I love that transparency. I think in this industry is so key. To have Brandon come and do a pre-inspection for any listing that we take, I think is good business regardless. And then you're not putting something out there for a renegotiation for your sellers.
Yeah. Tackle it all in the beginning
Yeah.
versus the surprises later.
Yeah, you don't want those contingencies on your offer. As few of them as you can have, the better off your seller is going to be.
Yeah, I don't think that's just for a hot market. I think that's
For any market.
regardless.
That's
That
good
makes sense
practice.
to just say, here's
Yep.
here's what it is. No renegotiation. If you want to have your own inspection, you're welcome to do that. Hire you again.
Then we can walk it through again.
But it's good to have that peace of mind for sure and know what you're, offering for sale.
Yeah, no surprises.
No
That's
surprises.
awesome. So not a deal breaker, it sounds like.
No.
Yeah.
Be a
Wonderful.
deal
That would be
breaker
the advice.
potential
Yeah.
Hey, but have
for the
everything.
seller. Like, get the
Get out of here.
Depends on the market, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I got another scenario here that I'm curious to hear if this is a deal breaker or not. The home has an outdated Federal Pacific panel. It's working fine, and it's been working for many years. But the home insurer will not insure the panel. For clients, do you feel like that's a deal breaker or not?
more and more. I think we should advise our clients to make buyer clients to make sure they have an insurance addendum in there. So maybe it's not an inspection issue. Maybe they waive the inspection, but they find that, and then they can lean on that to say this has to be done because it can't be insured. So that's something to pay attention to.
Plus, in this case, it's not even a buyer's request. It's a lender's request.
Yeah.
And if, I think we would have a very strong point to present to the seller that if it's not us, then any buyer who is going to finance will come up with this issue.
Yeah.
In cases like that, chances are that the seller would fix it.
And you don't want to be living in a house if they're living in the house as a seller that has one of those, because there's a reason why they won't insure it. I mean, that's a fire hazard.
Yeah.
Like, get it handled no matter what you do.
But it works now.
Yeah. It's been
Until the
working
house
past 30
catches
years.
fire, it's fine.
It's just fire.
In the last 30 years, it worked. So,
And a fire extinguisher.
yeah. Interesting. So, you would say that's not really a deal breaker, that, it would get figured out. Like, there's.
It could
always
be a
work
deal
out.
breaker.
Yeah,
Could
that's
be- could
definitely.
be,
If
yeah.
if the seller hasn't been advised that it's a Federal Pacific and they're finding out on the inspection and they don't have the funds, it could be a deal
Could be
breaker.
a deal
Yes.
breaker. Okay.
Yeah.
And they will likely fix it is what I guess we were agreeing on because of, the situation.
At some point, it's going to get fixed, but by who? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you
That's
want to improve
what-
your chances of selling this house?
See, pre-listing inspection. Here we go.
Yeah,
Exactly why.
and getting quotes. So having vendors that you're familiar with say what would it cost to put in a new panel, give them a rough idea. So then it's black and white, and they're dealing with things, not an emotional, less of an emotional
Yeah.
attachment to whatever that is the request is.
Wonderful. Yeah. Great insight. We're learning a lot here right right away. So many more scenarios here. But one here is the buyers learned that the sellers made recent plumbing repairs in the primary bathroom without permits or licensed contractor. It functions well, but the buyer is alarmed about it. For your buyers, have you found, with a lot of experience that you all have, has that been kind of a deal breaker in the past, or are most of your clients okay with that?
Whenever something is done without permits, it's definitely something that is a concern. And I think my recommendation there would be, again, depending on the market, of course, to get it reevaluated by a professional plumber, licensed plumber, and see if there are any issues and take the conversation from there, whether it's with the seller or the buyer. But the first step for me would be getting more information.
yeah, the extent of the plumbing repairs or upgrades or whatever they were doing, are they replacing a whole shower system, or are they just replacing some pipes underneath the sink, which is easy DIY thing?
Well, when they have an exceptional inspector from your company, they would be able to see, and maybe that would put them at ease to say the workmanship is done from what you can see. If you're talking about something behind the walls that you can't see, then absolutely that's another issue. But it goes back to talking about setting expectations with folks and saying potentially everything in this house was done without permitting or by the homeowner. We just don't know all of that. So to think that something just showed up, somebody just found out, if we let them know ahead of time, we don't know. That's why we have a professional inspector go through and take a look at what they can see. And there's always unknowns in any house. There's going to be different things, but yeah, have a professional look at it, a professional plumber, licensed plumber look at it.
Wonderful. So seems like people can work around it. Not really a deal breaker. That's a really good one.
Fire the buyer if they didn't buy it.
So here's one. It's kind of outside of the inspection part, and curious on your side of how you handled this or ran across this. So the scenario on this one is the buyer hears from a neighbor that another resident is frequently loud. They like to party all night long. They have a couple bands they play in, and it's not a soundproof room. So
They live
there's
next to you?
maybe.
That was emotional. That was emotional, right?
From a personal experience, there's no formal record of an issue, but now the buyer is a bit spooked. Do you find that to be a deal breaker or not?
They've got to do their due diligence before they buy a home, right? I mean, see what the traffic patterns are, knock on the neighbors' doors and see what they think about living there. Look up crime statistics. I mean, look up everything.
Not what we do,
And-
but what
Yeah, have the buyer do that. I mean, you want them to feel secure in their decision, right? But as far as the neighbor goes, that's a tricky one because what is happening there? I mean, how long has that neighbor been living there? What if that neighbor moves away? What if you have a great neighbor on the other side and the heavy metal band moves in next week? I mean, you don't really control who your neighbors are.
And you can't sell and leave just because somebody else who's moved in. I had a situation, something similar. So we didn't even know neighbor was an issue because I was representing the sellers, and the sellers were an elderly couple. The reason they sold was because they couldn't deal with the stairs. This was a unit, a condo on top of another condo. We sold to a young family that had 2 children. And when they moved in, we realized that the neighbor downstairs is a huge nuisance, if I may say so, because whenever the kids walk, and kids don't walk, kids run. Whenever the kids run, the lady, she was elderly, she couldn't come up. She had this stick, and she would scare the kids.
Oh,
So it got to the point that in 3 months, they were selling the house. It was a deal breaker for them. Their agent reached out to me and asked me if this was ever an issue because they were trying to raise it with the HOA as well. And we were an elderly couple, so never had any issues. But yes, it's a tricky one for sure, like Angelina mentioned.
Yeah, interesting. Sounds like it really could be a deal breaker.
So you
Depends on the situation for sure.
as
Yeah,
a
it
former
can be.
rock star and as an inspector, do you actually inspect for these items?
We do not. You know, I thought about putting a little sound meter thing on
Yeah.
the vehicles.
Beyond the scope
yeah.
of the inspection,
Yeah.
that's
It's a
the
little
first
there for
page
24 hours.
disclaimer.
yeah, it's just out for 24 hours, gets the decibel readings. And yeah, no, it's definitely, you can't pick your own neighbors. So, it happens. And the heavy metal band
In some
does
cases,
move in.
it's a deal breaker. In some cases, it's not. It
Yeah, again,
depends.
it's always up to the client, so we can advise. But as far as having an out or anything like that, there's nothing there.
And what if they're loud themselves? They have a party neighbor now, so
It's
more the
projection.
merrier.
No, yeah.
Projection.
Yeah, and to reiterate, to have your client go meet the neighbors is
Yeah.
can be priceless.
encourage
sure.
that for sure.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. Which my agent told me that when I was buying. So,
And a lot of
Good
it
agent.
goes back to, again, setting the expectations as far as neighbors, and that should be a part of the consultation for buyers.
interesting. Yeah.
Sure.
Great advice there. So we got another one here about odor in carpets. So the scenario is the buyer noticed a strong pet odor during the walkthroughs. It wasn't evident earlier, but now you're at the kind of towards the end of the process. They want the carpet professionally cleaned or replaced. Would this smell from pets be a deal breaker? Dan?
I don't think they have anything to stand on as far as legally, but as a setting the tone going in, do they have pets? Is it going to be an issue, potentially going to be an issue? We know that there's air fresheners, there's different things that sellers can do, so we can potentially have some signs of what's going on. But I think as a courtesy, maybe even having in your budget, like if that happened and you're representing your buyers, would you be willing to spend a couple $100s to have the carpets cleaned? That's the way I would look at it. I don't think it's required, but I think it would be a nice gesture and potentially, just show who you are, I guess.
Oh, so not a deal breaker.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but
Go for it.
our clients, the Hendersons. So one of the things we asked for was, can you please have the carpets? There are buyers. Can we please have the carpets cleaned before closing? And it was actually the carpet cleaning and the moisture that brought out all the smell from the rug. And it was a horror. It was undeniable. And in this case, the sellers agreed and they gave us the credit toward the carpet. And they were the whole thing was reasonable. Everyone was reasonable, but it was terrible.
Because at the end of the day,
If they'd never touched it, it would have been better.
The point of a walkthrough is to make sure that the house is in a condition it was in when we wrote the offer.
Yeah.
So it depends if the seller was living in the house. So maybe it wasn't evident before and now it is. And like in your case, of course, it came out.
The cleaning caused the
cleaning brought
problem.
it out.
Yeah.
So again, it would depend on the situation, but I agree with the panel here.
Wonderful. That actually brings me to another question. Just thinking of as you say that, for a deal breaker for somebody would be you're doing the final walkthrough and the house is nothing like what it was when the offer was put in, and you went through all the steps. But during that process, they see that they've taken out the shower heads, they've taken out their own faucets, they've done all their own. We want to make this. Took out some of the floor because they want to take that with them. Weird scenarios like that. Would that be a deal breaker?
Yeah, you call the escrow company, you stop the closing at the walkthrough.
Yeah.
Yes, this is not happening.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
because some things are part of the house, even if you don't write it into the contract. So, for example, appliances, if it's not written down, yes, you can take it. But you mentioned, things that are part of the house, like the flooring or the doorbell, for example, it's attached to the house, and the expectation is anything that's screwed into the house comes with the house,
It's in the
unless
contract.
unless the seller has specifically excluded it at the time you wrote the offer. So if that's not the case, at this point, you're breaching the contract and you can't do that. That's a deal breaker.
And then you run into gray areas where all the staging's out of the house, and then there's that big
yeah.
giant spot on the carpet, and then where the bed was, it's painted right around where the bed
yeah.
was, and it's a different color from what the other part is. And
We've seen these things
yes, it's real world scenarios.
multiple times. Yeah, this stuff happens. How do you deal with it?
Yeah. So it sounds like you could actually be a deal breaker in that scenario.
They could have, and that's why we want to advise them to seek legal counsel. We wouldn't say you can walk out. And I mean, there's enough gray areas there to where we would not want to become an attorney.
Basically,
And if we were,
basically just going back to expectations that yes, this is what we expected, this is what we are getting right now, what are our options? So yes, speaking to counsel is definitely one option. Let's say it's a crazy market and you've found the home, you have been looking for 9 months. Let's think our options through. And speaking to the seller is also one of the options. So it's just going through all the options that there are, as opposed to just, freaking out yourself or letting the emotions on the other side get high. Just sitting down, having a conversation and seeing what are some of the options that would work for them.
yeah, we're in the business of bringing people together
Yes.
and helping to make things work, not looking for deal breakers, even
For
though
sure.
we're on deal
And like they
breaker,
mentioned,
not-
like Angelina and Will mentioned, in their case, everybody was very reasonable.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like to believe too. It's my experience too. In the most of the situations, people are reasonable. It's, once in a while that you have a difficult person on either side, but mostly people want to make things work.
Yeah.
So if you present reasonable options, chances are, if you're polite enough, you will meet the politeness of the other side too.
Well, I think that's where it's so important to have people like you
Like
all
yourselves.
working on behalf of buyers, because it's not about, I'm going to win. It's how can we work together? And this panel is exceptional at looking for areas where we can bring value and bring people together.
I would agree about that from my experience. That's awesome. So it sounds like it's not fully a deal breaker. It sounds like, it's also creating that relationship within the industry too. Like, this is a great group right here. I know you're all very involved in the industry. So knowing the other agents that you work with, or knowing the other people that are in the deal, that really helps. And so I've got another one where the seller requests rent back. They ask for a 10-day rent back after closing. Buyer wanted immediate possession and feels caught off guard. Could that be a deal breaker or not?
Well, I mean, have they already negotiated the contract?
Yes.
Okay, then you could have.
No,
If they've negotiated the contract, you stick with what's in black and white. I mean, of course, you ask, like you were saying, let's be reasonable, blah, blah. But
Then no.
honestly, no. I mean, if you signed off that possession was going to take place at closing and that doesn't work for the buyer, I'm sorry, you just need to leave.
Yeah, something like this doesn't come up at the last minute. Something like this has to be discussed well in advance when we're negotiating the original contract. It's not one of the later negotiations.
So it's not a deal breaker; it's a legality.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
legality.
legal thing. Yeah.
yeah, and again, looking for solutions. What's the reason? Is there something that could be worked out here? But that's after the no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one to know. I have 2 more scenarios here. So the buyer is maxed out financially. So after closing costs, the buyer will have little to no reserve cash. Even small repairs are overwhelming for them. Could that make this a deal breaker or not?
That's a tricky one because ideally we don't want buyers to max out, and that's part of the education.
Consultation, yeah.
Yeah, because some repairs might be expected, but there's so many things that are unexpected, and you need to leave yourself a buffer. But if something like that ends up happening, then of course, going back to the options, is there, family that you can talk to. Of course, we'll reach out to the seller too and see what can be done. But typically, I wouldn't want any of my clients to be in that position anyway. There should always be some buffer.
Yeah, there should be a buffer. The reason that Nick and I always get a home warranty for our buyers is specifically for instances like this. So with the home warranty, I think it's like a $100 service call, and the stove can't be fixed, then they'll end up getting a new one. And we get postcards every time that we have a buyer who uses this. And we see those postcards pretty frequently. We don't get a discount or anything on the home warranty. I mean, we're paying $750 like anybody would, but it's a very valuable gift.
Yeah.
People really appreciate it. And we have to remind them that they have it, because they'll call and be like, oh, I have a leak. I'm like, right. Did you call the home warranty company? Oh, I forgot I had that. So,
And so if you're short on cash, it's a good peace of mind to have something like that available to them.
Sure.
yeah, they appreciate it.
And it could be a conversation with the seller too. Say, look, I want these buyers to really get this, and unfortunately, they're in this situation. So there's the potential to get some room there, but with the counseling before, hopefully that'll be completely alleviated.
Awesome. So financially, there's workarounds for it. That, makes sense.
Or just ask the
Deal breaker.
inspector if he's got some extra cash. So,
Or can he just fix it while he's looking at it, or she's looking
you
at
made
it?
a lot of money on this deal. Can you just give up a little of your paycheck?
Oh yeah, we make the big bucks.
We never get asked that.
Last one I've got here is next door. The construction is going to be beginning soon next to the house. And after a mutual agreement, the buyer finds out the neighborhood will be under construction for 18 months. Is that a deal breaker or not?
I guess this goes back to the same neighbor question, that you can't really change certain things. And with the change in zoning that happened last year and going to be rolled out in the next, a couple of years, this is going to happen. And even if you buy a house where you didn't know during the contract phase that construction is going to begin, you move in and that could happen the next day. We have clients who have been living in neighborhoods for 5, 7, 10 years who bought the house in that neighborhood because they wanted to be in that neighborhood. And now the quality of that neighborhood is changing because there's a lot of construction coming, 1 single family home going and 3 townhomes coming up. That's not something you can change. So in my opinion, it would be just education and setting expectations. I feel like a broken record at this point, but I
It's a good
don't
record
think,
though, to break.
but I don't think this would be, my advice would be not to let that be a deal breaker, because that is something that can come up anytime during your ownership.
Yeah, unless you're backed up on Greenbelt, where nobody's ever going to be able to build, you can
protected.
expect it. You can have construction start next week, or in 5 years, you're going to be affected one way or another unless you insulate yourself by living someplace where it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and with the new laws that allow more than one unit in a residential lot, I think it's something that we have a conversation with the buyers prior to. If a lot next door looks like there's a possibility, at least having that conversation.
So it
Plus,
sounds like
it may not always be a bad thing, actually, because let's say the construction beginning on the lot is for a tear down. So if the tear down is gone and there's a new building there, even if it's 3 units there, it's going to bring the quality of the neighborhood up. So it might actually be a positive. So it depends on what kind of construction it is and why, if it is even a concern. So you can talk about those things, because there's one lot in my neighborhood that I would want rebuilt.
oh yeah.
I would be very happy when somebody decides to just tear it down and start construction.
Let's make it happen.
Make
Yeah.
it happen.
Get after them.
Do some investments, everybody.
Let's buy it.
So it sounds like you can navigate that where it's not a deal breaker, because always the expectations, setting the expectations, but then navigating it to letting them understand how there's value in it.
And always, I think, going back to this, we said it earlier, but it's always about the buyer's decision. It's always we're helping to navigate, helping them to make the best decision with all of the information that we can provide.
And I guess our advice here was very generic. It would be more specific because part of the consultation is also understanding what the buyer or the seller wants and then advising them according to their goals. So this is what you shared was what, your top 2 things were out of this transaction. If you do this, you would be working towards that. If you don't do this, you would be working against that. And here's how we can make it work. So if it can be tailored and customized to a client once you know what their actual goal is with any given transaction.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I want to say, Brandon, just a plug for you and your company is that your inspectors consistently, and I've worked with several of them, show up in a non-emotional way and provide the data that's valuable and present it in such a way that it's not off-putting to the buyers that I've worked with and the sellers in doing the pre-listing. So that's a big deal, and that shouldn't be overlooked as far as how you guys do it. So thank you for that.
For sure.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk about this and
course.
understand what's not a deal breaker and what is. And then also I learned a lot today. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.